Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Laurie Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Monday morning, July the 4th. I'm glad to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. We're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. And chat room is open. I did pop the link into there to Robert Burney's webpage as Joy to Me and You. And hopefully you're all having a great weekend. And for all my friends down in the States, happy 4th of July weekend. I'm from the States, so, I celebrate that with you as well. Independence Day, and we just had ours up here in Canada on the 1st. So celebrate. I'm kind of, it's kind of awesome. I get to celebrate both of those days, so that's great. Hope many of you might have the day off today, and I just wish you a really good day. And I love the States. I live in Canada, and I moved to Canada. Really, it was my opportunity at the age of 29 years old to run away, which is kind of silly, but that's exactly what happened. And I wanted, also it was an adventure for me. I wanted to come up to Canada because I have dual citizenship. So I wanted to come up here and see what it was like to be Canadian. All my family's Canadian. All my aunts and uncles and everybody, cousins and relatives are all Canadian. And so I wanted to be Canadian too. I was the only one born down in the States. And so it made sense for me to come up here and see if I could, what I could make of it up here, and it was also my opportunity to run away from my family, my immediate family, my mom and dad, and some of my siblings and whatnot, and get away from my life, which I thought I could do without carrying my baggage with me. But unfortunately, it came with me. So, but I'm up here, and I've been up here 16 years, and it's Canada's awesome, but I love the States too. So I sort of stay neutral, and I just love both countries because of what they stand for, and what the people these countries stand for, and that's freedom, and that's the freedom that offers me the opportunity to come on this show and talk about what I'm talking about, and the freedoms that we have here are just awesome. So thanks to everybody who's out here to protecting those freedoms, the servicemen and women and everybody out here who's doing something to help protect these freedoms that we have. It's just awesome. So I don't forget. And I know there's a lot of us out here that don't, so it's awesome. So, thanks for being here, everybody. I really appreciate it. I decided to go back onto my regular schedule and get up at 5, and this week, I have to go back to work pretty soon, so I don't know. I'll have a job here sooner or later, and so I thought, I'll just start back on my 6 o'clock time slot. But I appreciate everybody who's tuning in. Just awesome, and thanks very much. I almost have 33,000 shows to listen to. So some of you people must be just tuning in all the time. I don't know who you are. I know who some people are, but most of the people that listen to my shows, I really have no idea who you are, and I just appreciate you being here with me. My good friend Gypsy Witch is here with me this morning. Hello, Gypsy Witch. Hope you're having a lovely night, and it's good that you can be here with me, as usual. That's awesome. So we're going to look at Robert Burney's web pages. That's what we're looking at. I was looking at positive affirmations there last week, probably a little bit the week before too. And this is part of the whole codependency pages that Robert Burney has. And the next section and the next portion of this is recovery from codependence, inner children healing. So that's the next part. And so, you have to listen at your own discretion, because I'm talking about abuse, and abuse is a very sensitive subject, It does bother a lot of people. I know for me it doesn't bother me to talk about this stuff because I've had to live with it my whole life, So it doesn't bother me to have to think about it. Excuse me, or to talk about it. It doesn't affect me because I've had to live with this my whole life. But, for many people, the topics of abuse may bother you, and also for survivors who are just starting out on your healing journey, it could trigger you. So you have to be very careful what you're listening to, and ultimately it is your discretion. You have to know what's good for you to listen to. And if you think the topics of abuse and violence and sexual violence and whatever, any of those types of things bother you, you have to turn the show off, right? It is your discretion. Young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my shows, mainly because I have a lot of adult content on my shows. It's all about stopping child abuse, but it's mainly for adult, audiences. I mean, young children, I would not recommend listening to this show. And so, if you are a younger person, if you're under the age of 18, just have somebody listen to the show with you so they can help you make a decision whether you should be listening or not, okay? Thanks very much. So we're going to get right into this, and this is recovery from codependency, inner children healing. We've probably already read through some of his stuff. Is sort of repeated through there because he's written his book. Robert Burney he's an author. He's written a book called Codependence: The Dance of Wounded Souls. He's a codependent therapist. He's a grief counselor. he's a spiritual teacher and he's an author, and he's got his excerpts from his book all throughout his web pages. So you can go check his web pages out at www.joy.com. And you can go through his site index there and see the amount of stuff that he has there. Robert Burney's done an awesome job. This website's great. Like, if you go to the site index, you can see that he covers everything. I mean, he just writes and writes and writes, and he's written a lot of great stuff about, boundary work and codependence and all kinds of stuff, relationship stuff. So, hopefully we'll go check that out. I'd like to get a hold of his book, and probably will once I get some extra money. And, I find that most of his stuff I agree with. Some of it makes sense to me. Well, some of it doesn't, but that's, we're not going to always agree with all of this stuff, and, like, I don't see stuff and just say automatically, just because it's written there, agree with it. If it makes sense to me, it does, and if I can relate to it, then I do. But otherwise, I mean, some of the stuff I don't relate to, so, and some of it just doesn't sit well with the way that I think or feel, but it doesn't matter because it's good information. It's good to take a look at this stuff, and I like really what he has to say. He's talking about the whole issue of codependence and codependence, distorted, sort of dysfunctional ways of thinking and stuff. And he says, it's really it's not just an individual problem. It's a societal problem. Society is sick, and the disease is actually throughout society. That's how we've based our belief systems and our, all kinds of stuff on these dysfunctional, distorted ways of thinking. And I really like what he has to say because it's so true. So I'm just going to read from his web pages, and you can just follow along there from the link I did pop into the chat room. So, codependency, recovery, inner child healing is a way of life, Robert Burney says, and he says, it is a way to live life that works. It works to help an individual gain some freedom from the past. It is a path for living that facilitates developing a centered ground space within, where inner peace exists, right? That creates the space for a person to be present in the moment and be happy to be alive, to connect with joy some of the time. He says the inner child healing work is part of our spiritual evolutionary journey, and doing this work requires consciousness raising, enlightenment, and we need to become conscious of our inner process by developing the detached observer, witness, detective, defense attorney, compassionate parent level of consciousness. And the more conscious we become, the easier it is to see how powerful our reactive programming has been. And by becoming conscious of it, we can change it. And he says, we can't do perfectly. We will make gradual progress, and we will resist and procrastinate and make excuses because we are human. So I like what some of the stuff he says is really quite comical. He says one of the trickiest things about his process is to stop judging ourselves for being human at the same time we're doing whatever it takes to align with healing and transformation. So, he's right. But the only way that we really, for me, on my healing journey, the only way that I'm actually going to be able to heal is to be able to be honest with myself, and to be able to take a look at my behaviors and why I'm doing what I'm doing. You have to get right in there, and sometimes we don't want to see that stuff, and we don't want to deal with it, And sometimes we just don't see it because we've been doing it for so long. We may not even recognize some of the behaviors that we're doing. I'm sure that, like, I've had people point stuff out to me. I was talking about that before on the show, that in the past where, I didn't recognize these behaviors as being dysfunctional or codependent because it's just how I live my life. Being brought up that way seemed okay to me because I was just doing everything out of fear-based, you know what I mean? Like, all my decisions were being made by this 7 or 8 year old child within me. And so, quitting jobs, not allowing people to any kind of constructive criticism. Criticism for me is harsh because, growing up abused, right? I mean, I was told many, many horrible things, obviously, and so whenever somebody has something to say about something I'm doing, my defense mechanisms come up right away, and all of a sudden I'm like, so what? So what? You don't like what I'm doing? I just shut them out, I just tune them out, I shut them out. Some of it may be constructive, some of the criticism may be there to help me out, so I can learn from my mistakes, right, and learn from things I'm doing. So I've actually had people, codependent, like not codependents, but life skill coaches, point out a few things to me that I thought was interesting, and actually did help me out because I realized then that I was doing a lot of stuff to self-sabotage, and mainly because of this whole, codependence and ways of thinking and behavioral issues that I had, and didn't even realize that I was actually doing these things, and I didn't realize why I was doing them. And it was really all based out of fear and fear-based stuff, and just a coping mechanism I developed along the way to survive. You know what I mean? So as a child, it got me through, and as a young person, it got me through, and it was what I needed to actually survive. But then, as an adult, now in my safe world, quote unquote, how safe it is. I mean, we know nothing's really that safe, but at least I don't have anybody abusing me because I make the right choices on who I can have in my life and who will be in my life. You know what I mean? Like, I don't allow abusive people in my life anymore, and so as an adult, I'm not being abused, right? Which is great. I mean, that's awesome. I wish that for everybody. I know that many survivors will allow abusers back into their life, because they're this whole re-victimization thing, this whole thing of being set up to be re-victimized their whole life, and if you don't make those right choices, you can end up being abused your whole life. That's what my mother did. So, I mean, it can happen. But I made the decision that no, I would not allow somebody to come into my life who's not going to treat me with respect and dignity, and and hurt me. Forget that. So, my adult life is going along quite well, but I'm still letting this 7-8-year-old make these decisions for me, and it's like, no, at some point, like, she doesn't trust anybody, so she, people say something to me, it's automatically her defenses are up, and she's like, what are you saying about us? It's like, so it's pretty harsh. We need to, if we're going to really heal, we have to be honest, really honest with ourselves, and really get down to the truth of what we've had to deal with, why we put up these, why we do these things, why we had to develop these behaviors in order to survive, and then how as an adult we're going to have to change it around so that we're not self-sabotaging and hurting ourselves now, because now we're the ones that really, as some of Robert Birdie's web pages there, when you're reading through there, we're the ones that become the perpetrator then. The perpetrator, the abusers could be long gone or dead or whatever, and then we're still doing this stuff to ourselves, holding ourselves in contempt for being human, putting all kinds of pressure on ourselves and feeling, lesser than and all this. And there's even maybe nobody in our life that's actually putting us down. These people, this was from before, and I think that's where we have to get, do a reality check and say, okay, wait a minute, that's from the past. Now I have to learn how to integrate, and now I need to kind of bring myself up to the present and allow myself to work through the past in order to move past it. So this is kind of what I'm doing, and it's, it's a long process. It doesn't happen, like this certainly isn't going to happen overnight. It wouldn't matter if I spent day after day on it. I mean, it's going to take time to develop different ways of thinking, time to develop different ways of feeling. I still have a lot of emotional anger and emotional stuff going on. I probably always will, just because of the I'm not closing my eyes to the abuse that I suffered, you know what I mean? Like, if I wanted to be in denial, I wouldn't be doing these shows, you know what I mean? Like, I'm obviously not in denial. I'm seeking to move past this and seeking to hopefully help somebody else who's out there so that they know that they're not alone, and to reach and get some help, and that there's so many of us out here who are dealing with this, and they're certainly not alone, which is kind of sad, I mean, it is really pathetic, there's just so many of us, but it's the way it is, you know what I mean? So we have to get help, right? And so, or at least do self-help, whatever it is you're going to do, but make sure you do allow yourself to heal, right? So he says, Recovery from Codependency, Inner Child Healing by Robert Birdie. He says, it is through healing our inner child, our inner children, by grieving the wounds that we suffered, that we can change our behavior patterns and clear our emotional process. We can release the grief with its pent-up rage, shame, terror, and pain from those feeling places which exist within us. And he says that does not mean that the wound will ever be completely healed. There will always be a tender spot, a painful place within us due to the experiences that we have had. And what it does mean is that we can take the power away from those wounds. So by bringing them out of the darkness into the light, by releasing the energy, we can heal them enough so that they do not have the power to dictate how we live our lives today. And he says we can heal them enough to change the quality of our lives dramatically. And we can heal them enough to truly be happy, joyous, and free in the moment most of the time. And so he says here, his quotes on his webpage, his quotes from his book, Codependence, The Dance of Wounded Souls. So, I like what he has to say there. Now, some people have said, oh, no, you can heal completely from child abuse. And, I mean, I think that's awesome if, you know what I mean? Like, I kind of look for that. I hope for that, some people say no, we'll never, a person can never really be completely healed because the memories will be there unless you completely wipe out your memories, right? And then who are you if you do that, right? I mean, that's why I choose to not be in denial, because then who am I, right? I have to come up with some other completely different personality, right? If I didn't survive what I had to survive and it wasn't abused as a child, then who am I? I have to create some sort of a false reality for myself, which, I'm really trying to get to the truth, and the truth really means everything to me because that's how I choose to live my life. So, I don't know. He says, that does not mean that the wound will ever be completely healed. I mean, I sit around and I think about stuff, like yesterday yesterday was kind of a hard day for me, and I was sort of having flashbacks, and Sundays are a triggering day for me anyway. I have a problem with Sundays. Like, Sundays have been, a nemesis for me my whole life, and it's just a day that represents a lot of problems. So my family was always fighting on Sundays. My dad was always causing a lot of problems for my family on Sundays. Mainly from my mother. Then my mother would, of course, pass it on down to us. And so Sundays in my home were just a mess. There would always be people fighting, even if we went out to somebody's home or if we went to a restaurant. It didn't matter. Like, my parents were, it was absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, Sundays just were a really bad day. And then, of course, Monday morning we'd have to get up and go to school. And, what would you do on the weekend? Well, listen to my parents fight, watch them batter each other, and took a few beatings myself. And, it's kind of like it's the culmination of the weekend on Sunday. And a lot of problems with my dad's issue of being a Christian, and then coming home and from church and beating on my mother and slapping the kids around. And my brothers would try to defend my mother, and then they'd get beat on, and then I would try to defend my brothers, and then I'd get slapped around and told off, and it was just a mess, And my mother, of course, would be down for the rest of the day talking about killing herself, and so it was just a harsh day. Sundays were kind of really not good for us in our home. So Sundays for me today still, because of the memories that I have, I can sometimes sit back and not be all that comfortable with the day. So yesterday was one of those days, and I had a lot of flashbacks and stuff, and I was just sitting there thinking, I don't know if this stuff will ever really completely go away. But then if somebody asked me today, like, how do you feel? Are you feeling like you're making progress? Like, do you think that you're actually moving through your healing journey, or are you stuck somewhere, or will you ever be completely healed? That question I really don't know. But some of those questions, it's I completely, can be honest and say absolutely. I feel so much better than I ever have in my lifetime, because I've taken the responsibility on now of allowing myself to heal, and having that control and saying, no, this is my choice, this is my control, for once in my life, to do something positive and something healthy for myself. So things are looking a lot better than they ever were, because I feel now that, I'm headed in the right direction, right? Whereas 4 years ago, I was definitely still on the same road of destruction and wanting to self-injure, wanting to end my life and all kinds of horrible things. And, so have I made progress? Absolutely, But I've had people say, do you think you can really ever heal completely from child abuse? Well, there's a few people out there that I've heard that have said you can. And so, I like to keep the hope alive. I think that a person can become comfortable with themselves eventually. That's what my goal is to become completely comfortable with who I am in my own skin. And even with the abuse and with the garbage that I was put through as a child, that I can learn to completely love myself. And that I do love myself now, because I have done that whole, loving myself affirmation healing work. But the thing is, eventually I think what I'll be able to do is learn how to love my inner child, my inner self, enough to where she feels comfortable. That person that I was so long ago that is still causing these issues for me, because she's still grieving, And so the next portion of this is actually the grief process. And so we'll go through this week at some point. But I'd like to believe the person can heal. Why not? We can still, that's what I'm saying. The memories may never go away. I know what happened to me, and I'm not going to be in denial about it, minimize it, or diminish it in any way. The abuse is abuse. I don't condone abuse, and I think it's horrible. And I'm fighting to stop child abuse, right? And so why would I sit there and say, oh, it's okay what happened to me, that's fine? No, it's not okay. It never was okay, and it never will be okay. So I have to be able to, at some point, be comfortable enough to love myself enough to pull my inner child through that. Because right now she's still sitting in a place where I haven't completely been able to get in touch with her to bring her where I'm at right now, which is safe. And I'm doing visualization work with Gypsy Witch actually, and which is awesome, and it's hopefully will help make a difference. But I'd like to believe that if I could eventually feel comfortable, completely comfortable, and bring these parts of myself together to say I am comfortable right now in my skin, I am at peace, and I like to believe that is totally possible. So he says, codependency, recovery, inner child healing is a way of life. It's a way to live life that works. So we already kind of read through that, but he repeats himself here. And he says it's not something we do and then get on with our lives. It's something we do in order to truly be alive. And he says life is a process, a journey. By being willing to do the inner child healing, we can learn to be present for the journey and to have the capacity to actually relax and enjoy it at times. And one of the very valuable things that I've learned in my recovery, this is Robert Burney talking, is echoed in something that I often say to people when I first start to work with them. Most of my counseling work is done by phone these days, and often I will end the session by saying, everything that happens in your life from now on is part of this process. So we are here to do this healing. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And we are in a body at this very special time in history to do this healing work. So the inner child healing work is part of our spiritual evolutionary journey. And doing this work requires consciousness raising enlightenment. So we need to become conscious of our own inner process by developing the detached observer, witness, detective, defense attorney, compassionate parent level of consciousness. And he says he sort of repeats himself here. The more conscious we become, the easier it is to see how powerful reactive programming has been. And by becoming conscious of it, we can change it. So this is sort of repeats himself here, what he's saying. But he says, doing the healing work, making recovery a way of life, allows us to make choices to define our reality from the place of faith and acceptance instead of victimization, fear, and shame. And it allows us to start having healthier relationships with ourselves and with others. And that's just it. I mean, that's just kind of like what I was talking about there, saying, I need to be able to feel comfortable with all the parts of myself. You know what I mean? Like the little wounded child within me, really, that the 7 or 8 year old that sits there, still in misery. She's doing much better than she was, for sure. She's not raging anymore, but still, I need to get a hold of her. What I need to do is show her that she is loved and that she is important to me, this little person that I was so long ago, and that, that she's safe now, right? I've actually read this on quite a few of the inner child healing pages and whatnot, and so I still, I'm still working through that. But so instead of, he says defining our reality from a place of faith and acceptance instead of victimization, fear, and shame. I mean, really, that's what I'm talking about. Acceptance and faith are just kind of eventually making peace with this whole thing. And it's like I said, I'm not going to ever condone the abuse that my parents put me through. There's people that say, there's so many survivors out there that are, go through the healing process, and they have to do whatever they have to do to feel good, about themselves, I guess. And if that's the only way they can do it by saying, oh, it's fine what I went through, it's just fine. I mean, some people, they have to do what they have to do to get through, And we're all different, and we're all going to feel differently, and that's why, we're not going to always agree with each other on everything. We're not going to always agree with everything that we read or see out there, or every counselor, or every therapist, or every group support, meeting or whatever. We're not going to always be in agreement, but because all of us are different, we've all been through different things. We've all had to handle things differently. We've all had to do what we had to do to stay alive and to stay sane. That's the whole issue, right? I mean, whether our lives were threatened or not, we still had to learn how to survive through that stuff, right? And so, so that we could keep our sanity, so that we could, not completely lose ourselves, you know what I mean? And I think, some of us have to deal with the healing journey sort of on the same level, you know what I mean? Whatever works for us now, it may not work, like what works for me may not work for somebody else, and what works for somebody else or makes sense to somebody else may not make sense to me. And that's okay. Like, I seriously believe that's fine. We don't all have to believe the same thing, and we don't have to feel the same way about things, you know what I mean? There's lots of people that like to think that, that if they if they actually don't completely forgive, and completely just, exonerate the people who abuse them and say it's fine what they did, I have to accept it, and I have to, there's people out there who are doing that, and for me that makes no sense at all, because I don't condone abuse. So, I have to learn how to deal with this in a way that that says, no, it wasn't okay at all what my parents did to me or my sibling. But, because I was my main people that really mainly hurt me. I mean, there's been other people in my life that have done some terrible things, but these people were responsible for my inner child, for my little small person being wounded. And that's what we're talking about on this show, because that's what I'm working through, right? This other stuff about other people, doing things that have bothered me in the past and stuff, I'm kind of willing to let that go because people make mistakes. But as far as my siblings sexually using me, I mean, that's absolutely unacceptable. And, the scars that left on my mind, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, my God, that's horrible. And my parents, will I ever forgive them really for, will I ever forgive them? I've actually had to forgive them just for me, you know what I mean? Not for them, but for me, so that I could learn how to move through this, right? But will I ever forgive what they did? And be okay with what they did to each other and to our family and to me? Probably not. I will never be okay with what they did. It will never be okay to me, the behaviors that they showed each other and they did to us. And I mean, that's not okay to do to your children or to do to your family. So, see, I cannot sit there, for me, I can't sit there and say, oh, it was fine, it's okay. Because to me, then what I'm saying is that, oh, it's fine if you batter your children and you beat your children, you burn your children, you allow sexual abuse to happen in your home. And that, that my parents could sexually abuse each other as well as fight, and verbally batter each other, physically batter each other. And and that was just fine, right? So for me to say, to sort of say, oh no, it was fine, it is to say that I condone abuse. It's to minimize what happened, and I can't do that. So that's where my my healing perspective has to come from. So not everybody's healing perspective is going to come from the same place, and so for me, I have to learn how to. At some point, allow my inner child, so obviously because I'm pretty sure that my inner self is happy that I don't condone abuse because she was horribly abused. So I'm sure that she's at least happy that I'm being honest and willing to say that abuse is wrong. But then again, do I hate my parents? Do I hate my sibling? No, I really don't. Like I thought I did, and I used to think that I did for years, but then I realized that I just hated what they were doing. So I hated the acts, and I hated the violence. I hated the abuse that they were putting on me and my family. But do I actually hate them? No, because then I realized that my inner child was screaming out, going, but I loved you, Mom. I love you, Mommy. Right? That's my inner, 8-year-old still crying out because she wants her mother to love her. And her mother's 16 years in the grave and didn't love her, didn't love her. And would she love her today? No, probably not. My mother, sitting here today, if she was still alive, would not have changed her mind, right? I mean, my mother she felt the way she felt, and she was a very sick woman, and she was abused, and she was just a mess, So spiritually, moving on, I'd like to think that, when we get to the next world, right, that my mother would make amends to my inner child, right? But here on the earth, she didn't. So my little inner child is still suffering with that. So for me to condone the abuse and say, oh, it was fine, it's like, no, it wasn't fine. It never will be fine. And I will do everything I can with my voice, with my words, with my writing, to change this mess here on this earth. I'm just one more voice, and one more book, one more person, one more individual standing up and saying, no, I cannot condone abuse. I refuse. I will not ever do it. I'm not going to ever minimize it either. So I just tell it like it is, because abuse is horrible. It's sick and it's twisted, and it never should happen. No, none of us should ever have to go through what we had to go through. So we'll pick back up here tomorrow. And thanks everybody for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here this morning. And if you can't cope and you're having a hard time, like my two of my brothers killed themselves. So I say this on every show. And I was going to kill myself, right? So thank God I'm smart enough and wise enough to not do that and to make a deal. I made a pact, and a commitment to myself that I would never, ever give up, and that I would never, ever, ever stop trying to heal and to move forward and allow myself to have a good life. And so, if you can't cope and you're having a hard time here, and things are just looking bad, and you make sure you reach out to somebody. And if you can't find somebody to talk to, then phone a crisis line anonymously. But do whatever you have to do to keep yourself alive. I wish my brothers would have done that, because they would still be here today. And it's sad, but suicide, man, is not the answer. And two of my brothers went to hell. They lived a life of hell, and then went to their graves in hell. And now I hope that they're not in hell. I hope that they're spiritually somewhere, getting help. But the poor guys, my God, don't allow yourself to suffer like that and to be destroyed by your past. You know what I mean? Make sure you get some help and reach out, because so many times there's nobody to talk to. I know this. I spent years wishing that somebody would just talk to me and hold my hand and walk with me through this journey. But it's hard to find people that will do that, and because it's painful, right? And so if you can't find somebody to talk to, you call a crisis line, you phone somebody, but you stick around, right? And I'll be back on tomorrow morning, same time, same place. I'll be on as well tonight. Child abuse prevention and human rights abuse prevention is up to us. And that show is definitely happening, and I got a great topic tonight, and I'm going to be bringing out some information that I think is very important. And also, Dreamcatchers Talk Radio, I'll be on here on Blog Talk Radio. If you type in Dreamcatchers on the search button at the top in Blog Talk Radio's front page there, the top of the page, if you type in Dreamcatchers, you can bring up our shows, and I'll be hosting on there throughout the week as well, along with some of the other team members from Dreamcatchers for Abused Children. So be sure and tune into those shows. We appreciate it. So thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Take good care of yourselves. I'll be back later on. Bye bye.